Axes in a parallel coordinates plot are pretty useful. I'm just going to talk a little bit about these axes that I added and some special touches that I gave here, like the little black outline around the numbers and also the custom styling as circles for the tick marks. Now with these axes, you can actually see what the values are for species, which makes this whole thing a lot more usable. I'll just review this code here, which creates the axes. First of all, we iterate over the columns with a for each, passing a function that takes as input the column, which is a string, and I, the index. Then we use the general update pattern to select a group element that has a class of y-axis dash, and then we insert the index of the array into the class name. And then we translate it by xscale of the column, which pushes it over. Then we use .call to actually call the axis. And I did something a little tricky here, which is if I is columns.length minus 1, in other words, if it is the last one, then we use axis right. Otherwise, we use axis left. The effect of that is that the tick marks, the labels for the tick marks, appear on the left for all of these axes except for the last one. And for the last one, I think it makes sense to put it on the right side because we have this margin available. So that's what that code does there. It just uses axis right or axis left, depending on whether or not I is the last one. And whatever axis type that happens to be, it gets invoked with y-scales at that column. And remember, y-scales contains the various scale definitions for each column. And then we just configure tick padding, tick size, and ticks. And in case you haven't seen these before, tick padding governs how far away the ticks are. I think I had it set to 8. Tick size governs how long that line is for the tick marks. And because I applied some custom styling, I set this to 0 to make these ticks actually look like circles. And then ticks of 6, this controls how many tick marks there are. And I wanted to kind of optimize it for readability, finding a happy medium between too many and not enough. So that's what those configuration parameters do. And that's pretty much it. And then there's a bunch of logic down here that really only serves to customize the styling. This part here styles the text to set the fill color, the font size. Oh, paint order stroke is a good one. Check this out. I put a stroke around the letters, and I'll make this red just so you can see it here. This is to make it more readable, because imagine if we don't set a stroke, it's sometimes white on white, you know, a white foreground on a light background, and you can't really see it. Like that 3 right there, I can't really see it at all. But if we put a stroke around it, we can see it. And if we make that stroke black, then we can really see it. It really pops out. But in order to make this work, we need paint order stroke. And if we don't have that, take a look at what we get. This is without paint order stroke. The stroke actually gets painted after the fill. So we end up with this ugly text. So that's the importance of paint order stroke. It paints the stroke first, and then on top of that comes the actual text, the fill of the text. And also stroke line join round is important so we don't get jagged edges on the stroke here. And then I just set some opacity for a nice touch so it's not so extreme. See, if it's 100%, it's quite an extreme black appearance there. So you can sort of tweak the opacity to make it pop just enough for it to be readable. And then here's some code that styles the tick lines as circles. We select all the lines within the axis group. We set the stroke to be white and we set the stroke line cap to be round. And keep in mind, these are line elements, not circle elements. I mean, we could write code that renders circle elements, but I figure why not leverage the existing axis code that makes lines, and we just style them so that they look like circles. And so you see all these little white dots are circles. And then we set the stroke width, which controls the size of those circles. And so I just wanted to make them sort of small tick mark circles there. And finally, we remove the domain path. See, if we don't do that, there are these lines, these vertical lines that are black. You can hardly see it here. But I figured they were not necessary because the shape of all these lines, the fact that they sort of bend at these points makes it sort of unnecessary. That's how you can add custom tick marks to axes.